Hey friends, tonight we're diving deep beneath crumbling abbey stones, not for relics or lost treasures, but for a legend whispered in fear, the forbidden medieval manuscript that monks buried in salt. Medieval monks risked everything to hide a prophecy, so dangerous, so strange, they believed it could only be tamed by the purest salt and endless darkness. So, before we begin, like the video, if these stories fascinate you, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Dim the lights, settle in, and let's unlock this chilling secret together, if you dare. The book bound in human skin, hidden beneath a cathedral. Beneath the ancient stones of a French cathedral, below the whispers of prayer, the flickering candlelight, the cold echo of footsteps, there slept a secret so disturbing its presence went unknown for 400 years. It was not a relic of gold or an artifact of power, but a book. A book, ordinary in shape, but monstrous in its very nature. Its cover was not leather, nor wood, nor any material one would expect. Its cover was crafted from human skin. This is no legend spun by villagers to frighten children. The evidence, when at last uncovered, chilled even the most rational historians to the bone. The tale begins in the 13th century, an era where faith and fear moved hand in hand through every shadowed street and stone corridor of Europe. France was a patchwork of kingdoms and rivalries, cathedrals rising skyward as both fortresses of faith and monuments to ambition. Within these walls, scribes worked by lamplight, copying holy texts, histories, and, sometimes, secrets meant for no one but the eyes of the initiated. No one knows the exact year when the book was created, nor the name of the artisan who committed the ultimate blasphemy. Some suggest it was a monk, obsessed with the notion of binding flesh to faith, sealing sin within Scripture. Others whisper it was the work of an alchemist, seeking immortality in the most literal sense, a belief that the soul could be trapped in parchment, that knowledge could be locked away, eternally protected by the skin of a condemned soul. Such grim practices, known as anthropodermic bibliopagy, did not begin or end with this one book. Across Europe, especially in times of plague or heresy trials, there are records of books bound in human skin, an ultimate punishment, a macabre memorial, or an act of penance for the damned. The skin might come from executed criminals, from plague victims, or from those deemed heretics. The very flesh that was supposed to burn, now stretched over words, meant to last forever. But this book, this particular manuscript, vanished almost as soon as it was created. Sealed in a hidden chamber beneath the cathedral, behind stones engraved with cryptic warnings, it slipped out of living memory. Why? Was it shame? Was it fear that the book would curse all who read it? Or did its pages contain knowledge so dangerous, so forbidden, that even the church could not risk it seeing daylight? Centuries passed, the world above changed. The cathedral became a landmark, then a curiosity. Its congregation thinning as revolution, war, and secularism swept through France. The city modernized. The past was paved over. Yet beneath, the secret endured, a silent pulse beneath the heartbeat of the city. Then, in the 19th century, during renovations, workers unearthed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air below was thick with centuries of dust, heavy with the scent of stone and decay. There, in a vault untouched by sunlight, they found a box sealed with ancient wax and the emblem of a forgotten bishop. Inside, a book, its cover oddly pale, disturbingly supple, the pores of human skin visible beneath faded lettering. A manuscript, its ink still legible after 4 centuries. The discovery sent ripples of horror and fascination through the scholarly world. Historians, theologians, forensic scientists all demanded answers. Was this truly human skin? What words did the pages guard so jealously? Laboratory tests confirmed the worst. The leather was indeed human, likely taken from a young adult in the 13th century. But whose skin? That question remains forever lost. The text itself was a labyrinth, a mix of religious commentary, coded messages, and passages written in a cipher known only to the writer. Some said the book contained lost gospels, others that it held the confessions of an executed heretic, written in blood, and sealed away as both punishment and warning. A few dared to believe it was a manual of forbidden rites, secrets too powerful to be entrusted to ordinary paper. The psychological impact on those who studied the manuscript was profound. Imagine turning the pages, knowing you were touching the last remains of a human being, their life story erased and rewritten as a vessel for other people's fears and obsessions. Scholars argued over ethics. Should the book be displayed or buried again? Was it a historical treasure or a crime scene preserved by time? Legends began to grow, as they always do in the shadow of real horror. Some believed the book was cursed, that readers would fall ill or die under mysterious circumstances. A handful of priests insisted it should be destroyed, the soul it once belonged to finally set free. Others, more pragmatic, saw it as a window into a world where death and faith, punishment and remembrance, intertwined in ways modern minds can barely comprehend. As the years passed, the book was studied, catalogued, sometimes hidden, sometimes exhibited. Yet every encounter with it reignites the old questions. What drove someone to bind words in flesh? What truths were so dangerous, so urgent, that only a human skin could protect them? Was it a statement of power? A confession? A desperate cry for immortality, or something darker? A ritual meant to bind body and soul in perpetual servitude to an idea? For 4 centuries, the cathedral stood above, its spires pointing toward heaven, while below, in silence, the book waited. And perhaps in some way, it still waits. Not just in the vaults of a French cathedral, but in every secret the past still guards, in every act of desperation, committed in the name of memory, penance, or power. History remembers kings, saints, and wars, but sometimes it is the silent, hidden objects, the things crafted in darkness and sealed away in stone, that reveal the true shadow side of civilization. The book bound in human skin beneath the cathedral is more than a relic. It is a reminder that the boundaries of faith, fear, and the human urge to leave a mark can blur in unimaginable ways. That even as light pours through stained glass above, the darkest secrets of humanity may be just a staircase away, forever waiting to be discovered. The manuscript that made monks go blind. In the mist-veiled hills of medieval Wales, beneath the echoing bells and stone arches of a remote monastery, a haunting story began to take shape. It is a story shrouded in half-truths and fragmented records, but what little survives is enough to chill the blood of any historian or bibliophile. Imagine a world before electric light, before printed books, a world where every text was copied by hand, every page a testament to human endurance. In this world, monks were the keepers of knowledge, the preservers of wisdom, and the silent guardians against the slow forgetting of civilization. Yet, within the cloisters of this Welsh monastery, there arrived a manuscript that would leave a trail of darkness no prayer could lift. No one is certain who first brought the book, only that it was old even by the standards of that age, its cover warped by centuries, its pages inked with an alphabet that seemed to shiver beneath candlelight. The abbot ordered it to be copied, as was custom. And so, the task fell to the scribes, men trained for years to endure the eye-straining monotony of endless script, men who had weathered the aches and fevers of a lifetime, hunched over vellum and ink. The first scribe set to work. At first, nothing seemed amiss. But as the hours dragged on, a strange fatigue crept into his bones. He blinked away shadows, finding it harder and harder to focus. He blamed the dim light, the damp air, the thick smell of tallow and old paper. But by dawn, his vision had faded to a gray blur, and within a day, he was blind. The monastery was thrown into confusion, but the task was too sacred, too urgent to abandon. The book, after all, might contain some lost wisdom, a forgotten prayer, or a cure for the ills that haunted the world beyond those thick stone walls. Another scribe took up the pen. He lasted 2 days, the next barely a night. Panic gave way to superstition. Some whispered of a curse, others of a poison hidden in the ink, or a trick of the devil come to steal their sight. But the abbot, bound by duty and faith, refused to give in to fear. He summoned the monastery's physician, who inspected the scribes, and found nothing but pale eyes, trembling hands, and a terror no medicine could treat. Still, the copying continued, driven by a desperate sense that the manuscript's secrets were too precious to destroy, no matter the cost. One scribe, before succumbing to blindness, managed to record his experience in the margin of a Psalter. He wrote of letters that seemed to swim and dance, of words that grew brighter the longer he looked, until a stabbing pain shot through his skull and all went dark. Another left only a single trembling line. The light that dwells within these words is not for the eyes of men. Over the following weeks, 6 more monks lost their sight. Some recovered partially after months of darkness, their vision forever blurred. Others never saw again. The monastery became gripped by fear and a sense of doom, its once joyful halls echoing with prayers for deliverance. The abbot, tormented by guilt, finally ordered the manuscript sealed away. For a time, its presence was simply a shadow in the scriptorium, a secret spoken of in hushed tones during cold winter nights. But word of the calamity could not be contained. Whispers spread beyond the monastery walls, to other abbeys, to local nobles, to the church itself. Some called for the text to be burned, suspecting heresy or demonic influence. Others, captivated by the promise of forbidden wisdom, tried to obtain fragments or to decode the nature of the manuscript's curse. One chronicler, writing decades later, speculated that the book contained matters of the heavens written in such a cipher that to gaze upon it with longing was to be blinded by the light of divine knowledge. Others believed it might have been a medical text, its ink mixed with toxic compounds, arsenic, belladonna, or some other medieval poison designed to destroy those who dared to learn its secrets. Modern historians, piecing together scraps from letters and inventories, suggest a more chilling possibility. In an age of secrecy and suspicion, monasteries sometimes protected their greatest treasures not with locks or guards, but with subtle, intentional traps. The ink, perhaps, was laced with a slow-acting toxin, absorbed through the skin or inhaled in the candlelit gloom. The book, a repository of forbidden knowledge or heretical truth, was rendered unreadable except at the greatest risk. Others believed the blindness was psychosomatic, a mass reaction to fear, exhaustion, and the power of suggestion. After all, the mind can make the body betray itself, especially in places where faith and terror walk side by side. What is certain is that the abbot, desperate to halt the calamity, ordered the manuscript burned. The monks gathered in the chill of a pre-dawn courtyard, their faces gaunt and haunted, and watched as centuries of words went up in smoke and bitter ash. But not all was lost. A few charred pages, deemed too dangerous to touch, were hidden away in sealed chests and forgotten attics. Over the centuries, scholars have uncovered these fragments, some in the archives of Oxford, others in private collections, each one a puzzle piece in a story that refuses to die. Those who have examined the surviving pages report nothing unusual. The script is clear, the language archaic but comprehensible. Yet some claim that even now, to stare too long at the letters is to feel a prickling behind the eyes, a sense of something moving, watching, waiting within the ink. Is it superstition, the echo of an old curse? Or does the manuscript truly hold a power beyond understanding, a light that still blinds from across the centuries? The story of the blind monks haunts historians not because it is unique, but because it reveals how fragile the line is between knowledge and destruction. In a world built on secrets and faith, the quest to preserve wisdom can become an act of peril. The Welsh manuscript, whatever its origins, was a mirror held up to the dangers of curiosity, a warning that some truths once glimpsed demand a price in flesh and sight. And so, the legend endures, of a book that turned wisdom into darkness, and of the men who sacrificed their vision in a search for light. The pages that cried blood during Lent. In the shadowed corridors of medieval Spain, among stone walls damp with centuries of incense and whispered prayers, there is a story that has outlasted the dust and silence of history. It is not the tale of kings or battles, but of a single manuscript, a book that, in the eyes of its keepers, bled like flesh during the holiest week of the Christian calendar. For generations, its legend remained buried under veils of fear and reverence, surfacing only in the trembling script of monastic chronicles and the haunted eyes of those who witnessed it. Yet the story's heartbeat, like the red liquid that seeped from its pages, refuses to die. The year is 1603. In the Abbey of San Sebastián de Silos, a Benedictine sanctuary cradled among Spain's Castilian hills, monks are preparing for Lent. The abbey is a fortress of devotion, its days governed by the toll of bells and the cycle of scripture, chant, and silence. But as Holy Week approaches, a sense of unease stirs within the cloisters. The brothers, seasoned in the discipline of faith and hardship, sense that something in the abbey is about to awaken. It begins with a single page. A monk, copying scripture late at night by candlelight, notices a stain spreading across the parchment of an ancient Psalter, an heirloom said to predate the conquest of Spain itself. The liquid is viscous, red as fresh blood, and glistens beneath the flickering flame. At first, he assumes an accident, a burst finger, spilled ink, but the stain is warm, with a coppery scent no scribe's pigment could mimic. He touches it and recoils, shocked by the unmistakable feeling of blood between his fingers. Word spreads among the brethren. In the daylight, the phenomenon seems even stranger. There are no wounds on the monk, no injuries among the others, no spilled wine, no leaky pipes, no explanation that satisfies even the youngest novice. Over the next days, the bleeding recurs. The manuscript's pages, all bound with sacred care, continue to weep red droplets. Never enough to form a pool, but always enough to mark the parchment and leave a crimson trail across the monk's trembling hands. Panic and awe ripple through the abbey. To the monks, this is not just an oddity. It is a sign, a message, or a curse. Some believe it is a holy warning, a reminder of Christ's own suffering, delivered in the language of miracles. Others, recalling tales of demonic trickery, whisper about possession. The prior orders prayers of repentance. The abbot sends word to the bishop, who dispatches scholars and exorcists to the scene. For the monks, sleep becomes impossible. Their dreams are filled with images of bloodied pages and voices chanting from the depths of the crypt. During Holy Week, the phenomenon intensifies. The bleeding peaks on Good Friday, the day Christians believe Christ's passion reached its agony. That night, a crowd gathers in the scriptorium, brothers, clergy, even local peasants drawn by rumor and dread. In silence, they watch as the red liquid wells from the book's pages, running along the edges, beating and falling to the table below. Some claim to see faces in the stains. Others say the blood moves as if alive, tracing words in Latin that shift and dissolve before their eyes. Desperation mounts. The bishop's exorcists perform rites over the manuscript, sprinkling it with holy water, binding it in linen, chanting prayers meant to drive out any evil that may have claimed it. Yet the bleeding persists. Monks begin to fast beyond reason, praying for deliverance from what many are now certain is a demonic force. A sense of dread envelops the abbey. Candles burn at all hours, casting the halls in restless light. Unable to halt the miracle or the curse, the monks turn to the last resort of their tradition. They seal the manuscript in a wooden box, surround it with relics and holy symbols, and carry it in procession to the church's altar. There, beneath the very stone where generations of their order have prayed, they dig a shallow grave. The book, still weeping its silent tears, is laid to rest, hidden from the eyes of the world. They bury it not as a heresy, nor as a miracle, but as a danger, a sacred wound that refuses to heal. For years after, the abbey remains marked by the event. Monks come and go, but the story of the bleeding book echoes in every whispered prayer and every flickering candle. Some claim that on stormy nights, red stains bloom on the stones above the altar, or that voices can be heard from beneath, murmuring in a language no living soul remembers. Pilgrims arrive, seeking relics or redemption, pressing their hands to the cold altar in hope or terror. Historians who examine the records centuries later are baffled. Some speculate that the manuscript's bleeding was the result of rare fungi or bacteria, a natural phenomenon mistaken for supernatural. Others, examining the monk's own writings, see a reflection of medieval Spain's obsessions, a society riven by faith and doubt, fear of heresy and hunger for miracles. But even the most rational investigator cannot deny the power the event held over those who lived through it. The legend survives in the abbey's own chronicles, painstakingly preserved through wars, revolutions, and the slow decay of empire. The manuscript's exact location beneath the altar remains a secret, guarded by generations of monks sworn to silence. Only on rare occasions do outsiders catch a glimpse. An old record in the abbey's library, a stained page slipped by accident, a fleeting red mark in the flicker of candlelight. Today, if you visit the Abbey of San Sebastián de Silos, you will find its church much as it was centuries ago. The air is thick with incense. The stones are cool to the touch. And in the silence beneath the altar, something waits, a relic of fear, faith, and the fragile border between miracle and madness. For the monks, the manuscript is a warning and a promise. that the sacred and the inexplicable are never far apart, and that some mysteries, no matter how many centuries pass, will always bleed through the pages of history. Even now, the legend endures, more than a ghost story, more than a footnote. It's a reminder that faith is not just built on certainty, but on the places where reason fails and the unknown seeps in. And somewhere, deep beneath that altar, the pages that cried blood during Lent lie wrapped in darkness and memory, holding fast to a secret that perhaps no one will ever read again. But all who come to pray there know the past is never truly silent. Sometimes, if you listen close enough, you can almost hear the heartbeat of a miracle still waiting to be explained. The monastic grimoire that changed ink to gold. In the world of forgotten texts and lost alchemy, there exists a single legend that still stirs the hearts of historians, cryptographers, and treasure seekers alike. A legend written not in gold, but in the memory of gold. In the year 1412, on a storm-swept night in central Italy, an event occurred that would echo across centuries and send ripples through every corner of the scholarly world. The disappearance of a monastic grimoire so powerful, so strange, that even a single surviving page has confounded the brightest minds for over 600 years. The monastic grimoire, as it is known today, was a creation of the Benedictine monks of Umbria, scholars who labored by candlelight in cold stone cells, whose lives were shaped by silence, devotion, and the relentless pursuit of sacred and secret knowledge. In their library, locked behind doors of iron and prayers whispered in Latin, the monks compiled a tome of such remarkable power that it was said to blur the boundary between science and miracle. This was no ordinary prayer book, no mere collection of herbal recipes or saintly visions. It was, instead, a catalogue of impossible transmutations, a book written by men who believed that the world itself was a cipher waiting to be solved. The heart of the legend is a single, extraordinary recipe, scrawled in the margins of the only surviving page, hidden between lines of Latin invocations and mathematical diagrams, is a formula for ink that would, when exposed to the full light of the moon, transform into solid gold. Not metaphorical gold, not the gilding of spiritual insight, but literal, gleaming, elemental gold. The script is delicate and precise, the recipe maddeningly incomplete, a litany of exotic ingredients and alchemical instructions, but missing a few crucial steps, as if the writer knew he was running out of time. What happened to the rest of the grimoire remains one of history's sharpest mysteries. On the night of the vanished book, witnesses recall the sound of hooves in the rain, cloaked figures slipping through the monastery's orchard, and the frantic tolling of the chapel bell. In the morning, the library was ransacked, shelves thrown down, glass shattered, blood smeared across the cold floor. The book itself, hundreds of pages thick, bound in dark leather, sealed with a clasp of unmarked metal, was gone. Only one torn page was left behind, fluttering in the wind beside an open window. The rest was never seen again. For centuries, scholars have obsessed over that single surviving page. It sits today in a climate-controlled glass case, locked away in the Vatican's secret archives, accessible only to a handful of researchers. The parchment itself glows faintly under certain wavelengths, its ink shifting color as the moon rises, an effect that no modern scientist has ever been able to replicate. The recipe's language is maddeningly cryptic. There are references to the water that has never touched sunlight, powders made from the bones of meteors, and a final step that simply reads, "Under the gaze of Diana, all secrets yield." Even for experts in medieval alchemy, the text is a paradox, too detailed to be a hoax, too incomplete to be understood. Theories about the grimoire's fate abound. Some believe it was stolen by rival monastic orders, desperate to unlock its secrets and use them to fund their own cathedrals and armies. Others claim the book was snatched by secular powers, the condottieri mercenaries of Renaissance Italy, who could have used gold-making ink to finance wars and buy kingdoms. There are whispers of a secret society formed in the wake of the grimoire's disappearance, whose members appear throughout European history at moments of financial upheaval and sudden, unexplained wealth. Yet, the most haunting theory is not about theft or conspiracy at all. It suggests that the monks themselves, realizing the danger of what they had made, orchestrated the book's destruction. Gold in the hands of the righteous is one thing. Gold in the hands of the desperate or the cruel is something else entirely. In this version, the final page was left as a warning, a deliberate fragment meant to tantalize but never to complete the circle. The monks vanished soon after the theft, their order dissolved, their church burned. The secret, if there ever was one, is lost to ash and rumor, but the legend never died. Throughout the Renaissance, stories surfaced of strange coins minted from lunar gold, of secret workshops where philosophers strove to replicate the lost ink. In the 1700s, a French alchemist claimed to have deciphered the page and produced a single golden letter under a harvest moon. He died a pauper, the letter lost in a fire that destroyed half his manuscripts. In the 1920s, during Mussolini's drive to recover Italy's lost treasures, an expedition was mounted to excavate the ruins of the old monastery. They found nothing. No gold, no book, only the faint traces of chemical stains deep in the earth. Even today, modern science cannot dismiss the possibility entirely. The surviving page contains compounds not native to Italy, suggesting the monks had access to trade routes or knowledge that spanned continents. Under the most advanced microscopes, the ink shows traces of elements that should not have been present in 15th century Europe. Was this evidence of lost knowledge, or a clever forgery centuries ahead of its time? The debate rages on. But what makes the story endure is not simply the promise of gold, or even the shadow of a perfect crime. It is the reminder that the greatest mysteries are often preserved not in what is found, but in what is missing. The monastic grimoire stands as a monument to the longing for transformation, to the belief that somewhere in the hidden codes of the world there is a key that will unlock the impossible. For 6 centuries, seekers have read that single moon-bleached page and dreamed of what might have been. Of gold made from ink, of power conjured from silence, of knowledge so dangerous that it could not be allowed to survive. As the moon rises over the Vatican tonight, that single page glimmers faintly in its case, a silent witness to the centuries of hope, greed, and wonder it has inspired. Somewhere in the shadows, perhaps, the rest of the grimoire still exists, hidden, waiting, its secrets as alive as ever. Or perhaps it was never meant to be solved at all, but only to remind us that the world's most precious magic is always just beyond our reach. The banned text that wrote itself at night. In the shadowed forests and frost-veiled valleys of medieval Bohemia, there once stood a monastery built not just of stone and faith, but of secrets. In those days, the world was thick with superstition and fear, and the boundaries between miracle and nightmare were blurred by candlelight and the relentless silence of the night. Yet, among the many stories whispered by monks and villagers, one tale seeped through the centuries, one that chills the soul even today, the story of the book that wrote itself at night. It began, as most horrors do, with hope. The monks of the Bohemian monastery prided themselves on their scholarship. Their scriptorium glowed with the slow, patient labor of copying sacred texts, each page a triumph over ignorance, each line a defense against the darkness. Yet, one winter, a new manuscript appeared. No one claimed to have written its first page. No one remembered its arrival. It was simply there, a bound volume, blank except for a single sentence, ink as black as midnight, forming words in a language no one could identify. The monks, devoted to knowledge but wary of blasphemy, left the book in a corner, unsure whether to keep or burn it. That night, the monastery was gripped by a deep, unnatural quiet. The next morning, a monk discovered the book lying open. 2 new pages filled, covered in the same inky, spidery script. No one admitted to writing them. The ink was fresh, the parchment still damp, the words dense with symbols and metaphors that defied translation. They brought the abbot, who ordered the book chained shut, locked to a lectern in the chapel, never to be opened again without his word. But the book was patient. The following night, the chain held, but by dawn, more pages had appeared. This time not just text, but eerie illustrations. Twisted towers, labyrinthine cities, faces with empty eyes, angels and demons entwined in a cosmic dance. The monks were terrified. Some whispered that the devil himself had crept through the walls to write his gospel. Others claimed the book was a message from purgatory, sent by souls desperate to escape. The abbot called for exorcists. Prayers echoed through the corridors as incense filled the halls, but the book's pages continued to multiply, each night adding to its impossible tale. Word spread beyond the monastery. Villagers arrived in awe and fear, hoping to glimpse the cursed volume. Some claimed the book's words would change depending on who read them. Prophecies for the desperate, confessions for the guilty, riddles for the wise. Others insisted the book's drawings would move when the moon was high, morphing into new shapes while no one watched. The legend grew. This was a text that drank from the minds of those who slept nearby, a manuscript written by dreams and nightmares alike. The monks kept careful records, trying to catch the culprit. They set guards, sealed the scriptorium, checked the book every hour through the night. It made no difference. The ink would appear in silence, in darkness, even under watchful eyes. Some brothers began to lose their grip on reality, haunted by the suspicion that their own thoughts might be leaking into the book, that their memories and sins were being written in midnight script for the world to someday read. One night, a monk claimed to see a ghostly hand emerge from the pages, bone white, wreathed in shadows, writing with a quill made of midnight feathers. Whether hallucination, dream, or warning, the story spread, infecting even the most rational minds with dread. The abbot, desperate to protect his flock and the monastery's reputation, ordered the ultimate solution. The book, still chained shut, was wrapped in sackcloth and sealed in a wooden box. The monks worked in silence, stacking bricks in the dead of night, walling up the alcove behind the altar where the book would lie in darkness, chained, boxed, and forgotten. A single record in the monastery's chronicle, dated 1309, notes this burial. Here we seal the text that writes itself, lest its shadow pass into our days. No one spoke of the book again. The monastery aged. Wars and plagues came and went. Fires took the roofs. Armies stripped its gold. Centuries wore down its stones. But always, somewhere in the ruins, people sensed a hidden presence, a feeling that something watched from the other side of the wall, listening to every prayer, every whispered secret. In the centuries that followed, stories resurfaced. Renovators claimed to hear scratching behind the altar. A few, driven by curiosity, pried loose bricks, only to find them scorched black from within, as if the very stone had tried to burn itself away from the cursed manuscript. The book was never found. Some say it still exists, waiting for someone foolish or desperate enough to unseal its prison. Others believe the book never truly needed parchment and ink, that it still writes itself in the world's hidden places, feeding on fear and fascination, appearing wherever dreams grow wild and reason falters. The story, after all, has never stopped growing. It passes from tongue to tongue, from one sleepless mind to another, a legend that writes itself into the night, a story that cannot die, because it is always being written anew. So next time you wake in darkness, sensing a presence by your side, ask yourself, what words are being written just out of sight? What secrets might you have whispered to the shadows, only to find them chained behind walls, waiting to be read by the future? The band of text that wrote itself at night is more than a manuscript buried in medieval stone. It is the living hunger for knowledge, for power, for stories too dangerous to be told in the light of day. And as long as people dream, as long as secrets are kept, as long as questions linger in the dark, the book will never truly be sealed. The salt-buried Codex that whispers when read, beneath the fractured stone foundations of an abandoned chapel, hidden deep in the cold heart of the Carpathians, miners once struck salt, and something stranger. The 19th century journals record the day as bitterly cold, the sort of day when frost needles the lungs and silence reigns beneath the earth. Work was slow, and the men superstitious. They muttered prayers against cave-ins, ghosts, and the spirits they believed haunted the underground labyrinth. Then, the pickaxe struck not rock, but a wooden box, rotted by centuries, sealed with hand-forged iron. Within, wrapped in faded cloth, they found a codex. Heavy, dense, the covers warped, and crystals of salt clinging to every page. From the beginning, the codex felt alive. Miners joked uneasily that it sweated in their hands or pulsed with the damp breath of the mine. When they brought it up into the weak daylight, the manuscript script glimmered with flecks of mica or some unknown mineral, catching the eye and making it nearly impossible to look away. News spread through the nearby villages, a book from the depths, preserved not by luck, but by the suffocating embrace of salt. Local priests claimed it was a relic, perhaps hidden by monks fleeing war or plague, or even by heretics desperate to protect a forbidden scripture. But soon, stranger tales began to circulate, tales not of visions or curses, but of a far subtler and more chilling phenomenon. Each time the Codex was opened, those nearby reported a faint, persistent whisper. It was never loud, never clear enough to catch words, just the soft susurration of something moving at the edge of hearing, as if the salt itself had remembered the voices of the dead, or the book was breathing out secrets one grain at a time. Skeptics scoffed, blaming echoes in the mine shafts or the whistling of wind through crumbling mortar, but over the years, the whispers grew harder to explain away. Some believed the manuscript itself was a work of rare genius, filled with lines and ciphers meant to hypnotize the mind, triggering auditory hallucinations in exhausted or suggestible listeners. Others speculated about more mundane causes. The pages, stiff with mineral deposits, might rub together in a way that mimicked speech, or the salt crystals, expanding and contracting with humidity, created the illusion of a living, whispering text. But those who spent time with the Codex described a sense of unease far beyond simple tricks of sound. They spoke of the book as if it were aware. Sometimes it felt warm, sometimes so cold it burned the fingertips. And always there was that insistent whispering, as though the manuscript itself was desperate to be read and yet terrified of being understood. Scholars who attempted to translate the Codex met with frustration. Its language was a jumble, Old Church Slavonic, scraps of Latin, odd runic symbols not seen elsewhere in local texts. Some pages seemed entirely blank until held in moonlight, revealing tangled diagrams and margins filled with names. Some crossed out, others repeated over and over, as if the author was trying to remember, or forget, something vital. Rumors surfaced that a handful of translators, after weeks locked in with the book, emerged sleepless, muttering in languages they had never learned, their eyes rimmed with salt burns. In time, the Codex was sealed away, first by the Church, then by the state, and finally lost to bureaucratic confusion and a sequence of shifting borders. It re-emerged in the archives of a small museum where the whispers began again, unnerving staff and visitors alike. Scientific tests found nothing unusual. No mechanism, no device, no evidence that the book was anything but parchment, ink, and ancient salt. Yet, late at night, guards reported voices in the vault, sometimes reciting prayers, sometimes pleading in tongues, that vanished when the Codex was shut. To this day, no one agrees on the truth. Was it an elaborate hoax, a masterpiece of psychological suggestion, or something stranger, an artifact not meant for human hands, holding the grief and longing of centuries underground? Whatever the answer, the salt-buried Codex stands as a reminder of the thin veil between matter and memory, between the secrets we bury and the voices that refuse to be silenced. For those who listen in the quiet, beneath the salt and stone, it is said the whispers still echo, waiting for the next reader to dare open the cover and discover what it is the book so desperately wants to say. The book with no known language, beneath the shadowed peaks of the Alps, where ancient monasteries and half-forgotten castles stand, watch over the valleys, there is a legend that has troubled scholars, cryptographers, and dreamers for centuries. It is the legend of a book, leather-bound, worn by ages, its spine soft with use, its pages untouched by understanding. Discovered in 1246, hidden in a chest within a stone cellar, this tome would become one of the most haunting riddles of medieval history. For within its 300 pages, there is no prayer, no poem, no decree, only the silent riddle of a language that does not exist, and a script that no one on earth has ever learned to read. It began with a discovery so ordinary it was almost missed. A shepherd, seeking shelter from a sudden storm, found the ruined remnants of a small building buried beneath ivy and snow. In the darkness, his torch revealed a wooden chest, sealed with wax and adorned with symbols he did not recognize. What he carried out, trembling in the early dawn, would soon become the obsession of his village's abbot, then the priests, then the nobility and scholars who traveled over perilous mountain passes to see the thing for themselves. The book was beautiful and uncanny. Its leather cover was etched with glyphs, spiraling and angular, that glinted gold in candlelight. The pages, made from the finest vellum, as smooth as river stones, were covered edge to edge in a careful, deliberate script. But the writing itself was like nothing anyone had seen. Each character was a shape all its own, looping and intersecting, at times almost pictorial, at times suggesting the barest echo of a letter. The words flowed across the page in lines and columns, sometimes clustering tightly, sometimes spaced like islands in a sea of empty parchment. There were diagrams, too, strange plants that had never grown in the Alps, stars that mapped no known heavens, figures in robes performing ceremonies no one could identify. The monks at first believed it was a lost gospel, perhaps penned by a sect exiled from the mainstream church. But the more they tried to read, the more the book resisted them. No cipher cracked its code. No alphabet fit its shapes. The pages yielded nothing but their beauty, and a growing sense of unease. Some said the book was written in the language of angels. Others whispered that it was the work of demons, sent to tempt or confuse the faithful. A few believed it was the diary of a madman, a record of dreams so strange they could only be preserved in a language invented for madness itself. Over the centuries, the book traveled. Hidden at times from the Inquisition, passed in secret between monasteries, it was studied by the greatest minds of every era. Medieval scholars tried to match its words to the languages of the Bible, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, but found nothing. Renaissance polymaths believed it might be the last remnant of Atlantis, or some lost civilization buried under the Alps themselves. Cryptographers, armed with the first tools of their trade, tried every method they knew: frequency analysis, mirror writing, even decoding the text as musical notation, but always the book refused to speak. In the Enlightenment, the tome found its way to universities, first in Switzerland, then to Paris, then to Prague. Philosophers speculated that it was not a language at all, but a philosophical treatise on the limits of human understanding. Theorists wondered if it was a memory palace, each glyph representing not a word, but a concept or a feeling, readable only to the person who wrote it. Mystics sought visions in the text, meditating for hours before its open pages, reporting only a profound sense of mystery and a feeling that the book itself was watching them, waiting for the right eyes to unlock its secret. In modern times, the book is carefully preserved under glass, its pages digitized and studied by teams of experts from across the globe. Computer algorithms have parsed every character, every pattern, every repetition. Yet no known linguistic structure matches the book's syntax. No root words emerge. No consistent grammar, no borrowed terms from Latin, Greek, or the ancient languages of Europe. Decades of scholarship have only deepened the mystery. There are those who have dedicated their lives to the book's solution. Some become convinced that the answer is just beyond reach, that if they stare long enough, map enough connections, the text will unravel before them. Others, driven mad by the puzzle, come to believe that the book is a deliberate trick, a test set by some medieval trickster to humble the pride of scholars forever. And still, the book endures. What makes the riddle of the book so powerful is not just its unreadability, but its defiance of everything we know about language, culture, and history. Language is the glue of civilization, the thread that weaves together past and present, dream and reality. Every other document from 1246 can be read, deciphered, placed within a tradition or a culture. This book stands outside time, refusing to be named, refusing to belong. It is both a relic and an orphan, carrying its message, if it is a message, into every new century. Rumors have grown around it like vines, that the book was found near the site of a vanished village, its population lost to plague, that its symbols match ancient petroglyphs high on the surrounding cliffs, that the ink, when analyzed, contains trace elements not found in any other medieval manuscript. Some say the diagrams show plants that have since gone extinct, or stars that once appeared in the sky before shifting in the heavens. Every page adds a new question, a new puzzle. And so, the book remains the centerpiece of countless exhibitions, the subject of papers, podcasts, and late-night debates among cryptographers and occultists. Each year, a handful of new theories appear: a lost Basque dialect, a cipher from Cathar heretics, even the language of extraterrestrials. Yet every theory stumbles at the same place. The words do not yield. The code holds fast. Standing before its glass case, you see your own reflection overlaying the script. You wonder if the secret was ever meant to be discovered, or if the book's true purpose is to remind us that some mysteries are eternal. In a world obsessed with explanation, the book is a wound in time, a beautiful impossibility, a question without an answer. And still, After all these centuries, it waits. Its 300 pages filled with the silence of the unknown, the patience of secrets, and the untranslatable language of wonder itself. The manuscript that was copied by a dead monk. In the annals of medieval history, among the dust-covered ledgers of abbeys and the fading ink of monastic journals, there are stories so quietly unsettling that they slip between the cracks of official chronicles. One such tale belongs to the Benedictine order, a story whispered in cloisters and retold by candlelight, half as a warning, half as a marvel. It's the story of the manuscript that was copied by a dead monk. The setting is a 13th century Benedictine monastery nestled in the misty hills of Central Europe, a place ruled by ritual and silence. Monks here lived by the strict cadence of prayer, labor, and study. Among their daily duties, none was more sacred or more arduous than the creation of illuminated manuscripts. These tomes were not just books, they were acts of devotion, vessels of knowledge, and sometimes treasures more valuable than gold. In the autumn of a year now blurred by centuries, the monastery's abbot assigned the task of copying a particularly valuable theological treatise to Brother Anselm. Anselm was a figure of routine and reliability, a scribe who had dedicated years to the careful, almost meditative reproduction of sacred texts. He worked alone, hunched over his desk in a narrow cell, breathing in the scent of parchment and candle wax, guided by the scratch of quill on calfskin and the faint chants echoing from the chapel. Weeks passed as Anselm worked late into the night. The other monks would occasionally glimpse his hunched form through the slit windows, a solitary figure whose life was measured in lines and letters. Then, without warning, he was found dead at his desk, a half-finished manuscript laid out before him. The monastery mourned. A funeral was held. His tools were gathered, his cell cleaned, his name entered into the necrology, the ledger of the dead. But then, something strange began to happen. The unfinished manuscript, set aside in the scriptorium, began to grow. At first, no one noticed. After all, scribes were always at work, and the piles of parchment were easily confused. But when the abbot inspected the manuscript several weeks later, he found it not only completed, but also flawless. Every page in Anselm's unique spidery hand, every illuminated initial a mirror of his style, no smudges, no signs of haste, just the same steady, patient artistry Anselm had shown in life. No monk claimed to have finished the work. No one had even seen another scribe touch the manuscript. The scriptorium was kept locked, the key held by the abbot. The hours passed as usual, marked by bells and prayers, but the manuscript itself had continued to grow, page by page, as if some invisible hand were still at work. Whispers began to circulate in the cloisters. Some said it was a miracle, a sign that Anselm's devotion had been so great that he was allowed to finish his holy work from beyond the grave. Others murmured darker possibilities, that the unfinished task had bound his spirit to the earth, and his restless soul had no peace until the manuscript was complete. Superstitious monks avoided the scriptorium after dark, convinced they might see the ghostly outline of Brother Anselm hunched over the desk, quill scratching soundlessly in the night. The abbot, troubled but practical, sent word to the bishop. An investigation was quietly conducted. The handwriting was compared, the inks and parchment analyzed, but all evidence pointed back to Anselm alone. No other scribe in the abbey could replicate his precise, angular script, not even under direct instruction. The illuminations, too, bore marks unique to Anselm. A tiny fleur-de-lis in the corner of every illustration, a habit known only to him. Outside the monastery, the story was told and retold. Pilgrims began to arrive, some hoping for blessings, others simply drawn by curiosity. The manuscript itself, now complete, was enshrined in the abbey's library, a source of both pride and unease. For the monks, it became a paradoxical relic, proof of divine grace perhaps, or an unnerving reminder that the boundary between the living and the dead was thinner than they wished to believe. The centuries passed, but the tale endured. Historians have since debated its truth, poring over faded journals and church records. Some believe the story was an invention, a way to explain a lost period of work or to glorify the abbey's reputation. Others point to the physical manuscript, now kept under glass in a museum, as evidence that something inexplicable really did happen. The analysis of the handwriting and pigments, even with modern forensic tools, cannot fully account for the seamless continuity in the work. Was it a clever forgery, a devotion-driven deception, or something stranger still? Perhaps the real power of the story lies not in its explanation, but in its persistence. The manuscript that was copied by a dead monk remains a symbol, a lingering question scribbled in the margins of history. It is a testament to the devotion of those who spend their lives in service to knowledge and faith, but also a warning that even in the most sacred halls, mystery still lives. And sometimes, in the flickering candlelight of a monastery, a story can slip loose from the grip of reason and become something eternal, an unfinished page quietly written, even after the scribe is gone. The forbidden hymnal that made monks dance until collapse. In the hushed halls of a medieval monastery, where every note of song was meant to praise the divine, one melody was whispered about only in fear. It was known as the forbidden hymnal, a songbook said to possess a power so strange, so overwhelming, that even the most disciplined monks lost themselves to it. The story begins in a remote abbey, far from the reach of bustling towns and royal edicts, a place where silence was sacred, and music was the language of the soul. No one remembers exactly when the hymnal arrived. Some claimed it was the work of a wandering composer, who vanished before dawn, leaving only a leather-bound book of unfamiliar notation on the altar. Others whispered that it was a relic from older, darker traditions, songs that predated the Christian faith, disguised as holy music. At first, the monks treated the book as a curiosity. Its pages were filled with hymns written in strange modes, harmonies that twisted and turned in ways no Gregorian chant ever had. The choir director, curious and unafraid, chose a hymn from its pages for Sunday Mass. The notes began like any other, soft, solemn, a rising invocation to the heavens. But something was different. The rhythm caught in the chest, the melody coiled around the mind like a serpent. One by one, the monks began to sway. Feet tapped the stone floor, bodies rocking in time with the music, eyes wide and unfocused. As the choir reached the chorus, the room erupted into chaos. Monks began to dance, arms flailing, robes swirling, faces flushed with rapture and terror. The music took hold of their bodies, bending them to its will. The director tried to stop, but his own legs betrayed him. The singing gave way to shouts, then to laughter, then to cries of pain as bodies collapsed, spent and trembling, unable to resist the hymn's relentless pulse. The scene was so disturbing that those who witnessed it could scarcely describe what happened. Some monks said it felt as if an unseen hand had lifted them from within, puppeteering their every move. Others described a sense of euphoria, a joy so intense it bordered on agony, forcing their bodies to dance until every muscle begged for release. Yet, for all their words, the truth was simple and terrifying. The hymn could not be controlled. The abbey's healer worked through the night, treating bruised limbs and broken spirits. By morning, the choir was silent. The hymnal was shut and locked away. But the temptation lingered. A week later, another group of monks dared to open the book again, convinced that they could master the melody with discipline and prayer. The results were even more catastrophic. This time, the frenzy spread beyond the choir. Lay brothers and servants, drawn by the sound, found themselves dancing involuntarily, overcome by the same wild force. Some laughed, some wept, some begged for help. But the music would not let them go until exhaustion or injury forced their collapse. Word spread through the abbey and then across the countryside. Was this the work of the devil? A test sent by God? Or some natural force, misunderstood and feared by minds not yet ready to comprehend it? The abbot, deeply shaken, summoned theologians and musicians from nearby monasteries. They pored over the hymnal's pages, searching for hidden codes, curses, or patterns. Some noted similarities to the so-called dancing plague that would sweep through Europe in later centuries, where entire towns danced uncontrollably for days, unable to rest until death or delirium set in. Could it be that certain rhythms or melodies, when arranged in just the right way, tapped into the most primal parts of the human mind, unlocking energies and compulsions long buried by ritual and reason? Fearing for his flock, the abbot decreed that the hymnal be destroyed, but those tasked with burning it balked. As flames touched the parchment, the air filled with the faintest echoes of music, haunting, seductive, impossible to resist. Terrified, they chose another path. The hymnal was sealed in thick beeswax, entombed within an iron box, and buried beneath the monastery's foundations. Prayers of exorcism were chanted as the ground was closed and strict orders were left. The book was never to be unearthed. Over the centuries, the abbey changed hands. Wars swept the land, fires gutted its walls, and new generations of monks lived and died, unaware of the danger buried beneath their feet. Yet, stories persisted. A night when music drifted up from the stones, making even the oldest brothers tap their feet in their sleep. A moment during renovations when workers claimed to hear faint, irresistible melodies humming through the walls. No one dared to dig deeper. Modern historians have sought the truth behind the legend. Was the forbidden hymnal a real artifact, or a myth born of mass hysteria and the human brain's susceptibility to rhythm and trance? Could it have been a rare form of musical epilepsy, triggered by certain sonic patterns? Or was it something even stranger, a glimpse into ancient knowledge of sound's ability to shape the body, mind, and soul? Some researchers point to surviving fragments of the story in abbey archives, where scribes describe a song that dances the body and a joy that wears the flesh to bone. Yet the hymnal itself remains hidden, its secrets entombed in wax and earth. Its story is a warning from the past, that even the most sacred music can become a weapon in the wrong hands, or the right hands at the wrong moment. That the line between rapture and ruin, between worship and surrender, is thinner than we imagine. So, if you ever visit an ancient monastery and you feel the urge to dance as sunlight falls through stained glass, remember, the music of the past is never truly silent. Sometimes it waits just below the surface, ready to rise and claim whoever dares to listen. The forbidden hymnal is more than a lost songbook. It is a reminder that some mysteries are meant to sleep, and some melodies once heard can never be forgotten. The illuminated scroll that burned through stone. In the wild, storm-lashed uplands of Bohemia, history remembers a monastery that guarded one of Europe's strangest relics, a scroll whose very presence defied the rules of matter and reason. The story, whispered across centuries by monks and villagers alike, is preserved in fragments of record and letters, their edges scorched, as if in silent tribute to the object at their heart. This is the tale of the illuminated scroll that burned through stone, a mystery that survived fire, rain, and the relentless march of time. The legend begins in the 15th century, as the Czech lands were battered by war, heresy, and a chaos that seemed to flow as freely as the rivers themselves. The monks of St. Michaelis Monastery were renowned as keepers of forbidden knowledge, protectors of heretical texts, and lost gospels too dangerous for the outside world. Among these treasures was a scroll, older than the monastery itself, said to glow faintly in darkness and to hum softly when the wind howled through the cloisters. The scroll's provenance was unknown. Some said it had been unearthed from the catacombs beneath Prague, others that it was a gift from an exiled scholar, or a relic snatched from the ruins of Constantinople. What united every version of the tale was fear. The object was considered too dangerous to read, too potent to destroy. To protect themselves and the world, the monks encased the scroll in a block of solid granite, sealing it with prayers, lead, and ancient waxes. It was locked away in a stone chamber beneath the abbey, guarded by ritual and superstition, visited only during the most desperate crises. For generations, the scroll slept in darkness, undisturbed. Then, one night, the skies above the monastery split with unnatural violence. A storm unlike any other tore at the spires and flung hail like shards of glass against stained glass and stone. Lightning struck the abbey tower, sending cracks racing through the flagstones. The monks, huddled in terrified prayer, heard a roar from below, a sound like stone boiling, metal shrieking, and something far deeper. A song, or a scream, or both, echoing through the crypts. At dawn, they ventured down to find the unimaginable. The granite casing that had imprisoned the scroll for centuries had been melted, dripping in strange, glassy rivulets across the flagstones, as if a blast furnace had been unleashed in the sealed chamber. And in the center, undamaged, lay the scroll, its illuminated script pulsing faintly with an inner fire. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and scorched stone. The scroll itself was warm, almost painfully so, though untouched by flame or weather. Its contents, once glimpsed, were impossible to decipher. The writing swirled and shifted, as if made of molten gold and obsidian, resisting every attempt to focus or comprehend. Scholars were summoned from Prague and Vienna, alchemists and priests alike drawn by the rumor of a relic that survived the melting of stone. None could explain it. The script, some said, was older than Latin, older even than Greek, written in symbols that danced and burned at the edges of perception. The scroll radiated a gentle heat that never faded, even in the dead of winter, as if it held a fragment of the storm that had freed it. Over time, the scroll became an object of obsession and dread. Some believed it was an angelic artifact, meant to be opened only in the end times. Others feared it was a relic of heresy, a message so dangerous that the earth itself had tried to bury it. The monks tried everything: water, sand, prayers, even exorcisms, to cool the scroll and decipher its message. Nothing worked. Each attempt to read it left the scribe dizzy, feverish, haunted by dreams of burning cities and towers of light collapsing into darkness. The scroll's legend only grew after the monastery's dissolution centuries later. Locals claimed that, on nights when storms battered the hills, the ground near the old abbey would grow warm, as if remembering the fire that once ran beneath its stones. The scroll itself vanished, smuggled away, lost in wars, or perhaps finally hidden where no storm could reach it. But the records remain. Stories of a manuscript that burned through stone and refused to yield its secrets, whose mere touch could set flesh shivering with ancient unspoken heat. To this day, historians and collectors hunt for the illuminated scroll. Some say fragments have surfaced in private collections, still warm, still unreadable, still humming softly in the dark. The world wonders what message was so potent, so dangerous, that even stone could not contain it, and what would happen if, one day, the scroll was finally opened, and the world was forced to reckon with the words that have burned for centuries, waiting to be heard. The black pages that refused to fade. In the rain-soaked heart of medieval England, among moss-laden stones and wind-bent yews, stood an abbey haunted not just by its history, but by a manuscript that defied every law of nature and reason. Known only in scattered chronicles as the Black Pages, this book was whispered about in corridors and cold refectories. Its very existence an affront to the expectations of the world, because unlike any other text, its ink did not fade with age. Instead, it grew darker. Each passing year, the letters bled deeper into the vellum, thickening and expanding as if feeding on time itself. The tale begins in the mid-1300s, as Europe reeled from famine, war, and the specter of plague. The monks of Ashford Abbey had seen death sweep through their numbers before, but in those years, fear pressed closer than ever. Into this anxious silence arrived a wanderer, a scribe, or perhaps a penitent, no one knows for certain. He claimed to have received a vision of the world's end, and carried with him a single slender volume wrapped in coarse wool and bound with tarnished silver clasps. The abbot, wary but curious, allowed the man to stay, and soon the stranger began copying the manuscript in the abbey's scriptorium. The first to notice the oddness of the ink was Brother Alfric, who was tasked with checking the new volume for errors. The black letters, fresh and glossy as spilled oil, glimmered against the page, so dark they seemed to drink the light from the windows. Each time Alfric checked the manuscript, the ink had changed, growing denser, the words thickening until they seemed almost three-dimensional. By the third week, entire passages had become nearly impossible to read, the script fusing into a shadowy mass. Rumor ran wild. Some believed the ink was made from the ashes of the damned, mixed with gall and soot under a blood moon. Others claimed the manuscript was cursed, a vessel for a prophecy that would only become legible when the last days were near. More practical monks tried to recreate the effect, testing local inks and pigments on scraps of old parchment. Nothing worked. Every experiment faded as expected, browning to sepia, the familiar soft erosion of time. Only the black pages deepened, swallowing detail, growing bolder as the years marched on. As decades passed, the book became an object of fear and reverence. There are records, some barely legible, others strangely lucid, of monks who spent years attempting to decode the text, certain that beneath the inky darkness lay warnings of pestilence, war, and apocalypse. Some claimed, in whispers traded over cold stew and weak ale, that at midnight the book's script would swirl and reveal new messages, as if the end-time prophecy itself was rewriting to match the ever-darkening world outside. Superstition fed upon itself. A handful of monks became obsessed, locking themselves in the library, reading until their sight failed or their minds buckled. Others reported dreams of cities drowned in shadow, of stars vanishing from the sky, of angels weeping ink instead of tears. The abbot, desperate to break the spell, ordered the book locked away in a stone chest. Prayers were said, salt scattered on the threshold, but the unease never faded. The black pages became legend. When the abbey fell to ruin centuries later, relic hunters scoured the wreckage, searching for the cursed manuscript. Some say it was taken by a wandering scholar, others claim it was buried beneath the stones to keep its prophecy from ever being fulfilled. Yet, every so often, a scrap turns up in an antiquarian's shop, a sliver of vellum so black no light escapes it, its surface oily and unyielding to touch. Modern science has no explanation. No ink, no pigment, no known chemical process can explain a script that grows darker, as if the very memory of words has become more real than the words themselves. To hold such a page is to feel the weight of history and fear, an artifact not merely of language, but of a world waiting for an ending only it can see. And so the legend endures, passed down in whispers by candlelight. The black pages that refused to fade, that deepened with each year, as if eager for the final hour, holding secrets meant to be revealed only when the world itself is ready to meet its end. A plan was devised. The scroll would be hidden in the earth itself, deep beneath the monastery, sealed away from prying eyes. It was wrapped in linen, doused in holy water, and placed in a leaden box. Under cover of darkness, monks carried it into a cavern hollowed out by centuries of volcanic tremors, a place so choked with sulfur and ash that nothing grew, and no one ventured willingly. There, amid the ancient volcanic rubble, the ash scroll was interred. The cavern's mouth was sealed, and prayers were said to keep it secret forever. Yet, as history would have it, fate intervened. Within a decade, the very volcano that haunted the region erupted with terrifying force. Ash rained down for days, smothering the monastery and entombing the scroll even deeper beneath the earth. The abbey was abandoned, its monks scattered or lost. For centuries, only silence and the shifting of stone marked the place where the scroll was buried. Centuries passed, and the story faded into local myth, half warning, half ghost story. Peasants spoke of a buried evil, of strange lights seen during storms, of dreams haunted by unreadable symbols. Some believed the volcano's anger had been provoked by the mystic's words. Others thought the scroll itself kept the land from healing, a wound that could not be closed. In the modern age, the ruins of the abbey were excavated, and geologists probing deep layers of ash and pumice stumbled upon a sealed chamber. There, perfectly preserved in volcanic ash, lay the leaden box. Inside, to the astonishment of historians and scientists alike, the scroll remained, still blackened, but whole. The ancient linen wrap had rotted away, the box corroded by centuries of minerals. But the parchment had not crumbled. Chemical analysis revealed no known fireproofing, no trick of materials that could explain its resilience. The symbols were still visible, their meanings as cryptic as ever, their purpose still unknown. Today, the ash scroll is kept under the strictest security, accessible only to a handful of scholars and theologians. Its contents are studied, debated, and feared. Some say the language is a lost code, an encrypted prayer, or a map to something never meant to be found. Others suggest it is a work of genius, a last rebellion by a mystic whose words simply refuse to be silenced. Yet the deeper mystery endures. What secret was so powerful that fire itself would not touch it? Was it a curse, a blessing, or a warning to those who believe that anything can be erased by force? The ash scroll that never turned to ash remains a testament to the limits of power, the endurance of forbidden knowledge, and the eerie truth that sometimes the things we most desperately try to destroy are the ones destined to outlast us all. The ash scroll that never turned to ash. Beneath the vaulted shadows of a medieval abbey, legends flicker between stone walls, tales of forbidden texts, sacred rituals, and mysteries the church could not explain away. Some are easily dismissed, but others linger like the smell of old smoke. And among these, one story burns brighter and stranger than all the rest. The tale of the ash scroll that never turned to ash. It begins in the late 14th century, in an age when Europe's boundaries of faith and heresy were razor thin, and the written word was more dangerous than the sword. In a remote monastic community on the slopes of Italy's restless volcanoes, a scribe named Brother Matthias was tasked with cataloging confiscated texts. Most were the usual fare: battered tracts, miscopied gospels, pages of idle speculation. But one scroll stood out, a tightly rolled parchment covered in a labyrinth of symbols and strange script, the handiwork of a mystic condemned for heresy by the Inquisition. The scroll's reputation preceded it. Monks whispered that it was written not with ink, but with a powder of crushed nightshade and the blood of a black goat. Some said it carried a curse. Others claimed the mystic's words could unlock visions or drive men mad. Regardless, the church had decreed its destruction, and on a grim winter morning, the monks gathered for the ritual burning. In the abbey's courtyard, flames leapt from a pyre of olive branches. Brother Matthias, hands trembling with both fear and fascination, unrolled the scroll atop the blaze. At first, it behaved as any parchment would. The edges curled, the surface blackened, strange characters vanishing beneath soot. But as the fire roared higher, something impossible happened. The scroll would not ignite. Even as the flames danced hungrily around it, the parchment remained stubbornly whole. Blackened, yes, but not consumed. When the fire died, it lay in the ashes, intact. Monks recoiled in awe and horror. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered that the devil himself had written its words. News spread through the abbey, and the abbot faced a dilemma. Destroying heresy was an act of faith. Failing to do so could bring suspicion, or worse, the attention of the Inquisition. Another burning was arranged, this time in the presence of higher-ranking clerics. Again the scroll refused the flames, turning darker but never disintegrating, as if protected by some force deeper than superstition. The monks grew afraid to touch it, believing it to be an unholy relic, a vessel that could not be erased by mortal means. Unable to destroy the scroll, the abbot resolved to bury it where no one could ever read its secrets. A plan was devised. The scroll would be hidden in the earth itself, deep beneath the monastery, sealed away from prying eyes. It was wrapped in linen, doused in holy water, and placed in a leaden box. Under cover of darkness, monks carried it into a cavern hollowed out by centuries of volcanic tremors, a place so choked with sulfur and ash that nothing grew, and no one ventured willingly. There, amid the ancient volcanic rubble, the ash scroll was interred. The cavern's mouth was sealed, and prayers were said to keep it secret forever. Yet, as history would have it, fate intervened. Within a decade, the very volcano that haunted the region erupted with terrifying force. Ash rained down for days, smothering the monastery and entombing the scroll even deeper beneath the earth. The abbey was abandoned, its monks scattered or lost. For centuries, only silence and the shifting of stone marked the place where the scroll was buried. Centuries passed, and the story faded into local myth, half warning, half ghost story. Peasants spoke of a buried evil, of strange lights seen during storms, of dreams haunted by unreadable symbols. Some believed the volcano's anger had been provoked by the mystic's words. Others thought the scroll itself kept the land from healing, a wound that could not be closed. In the modern age, the ruins of the abbey were excavated, and geologists probing deep layers of ash and pumice stumbled upon a sealed chamber. There, perfectly preserved in volcanic ash, lay the leaden box. Inside, to the astonishment of historians and scientists alike, the scroll remained, still blackened, but whole. The ancient linen wrap had rotted away, the box corroded by centuries of minerals, but the parchment had not crumbled. Chemical analysis revealed no known fireproofing, no trick of materials that could explain its resilience. The symbols were still visible, their meanings as cryptic as ever, their purpose still unknown. Today, the ash scroll is kept under the strictest security, accessible only to a handful of scholars and theologians. Its contents are studied, debated, and feared. Some say the language is a lost code, an encrypted prayer, or a map to something never meant to be found. Others suggest it is a work of genius, a last rebellion by a mystic whose words simply refuse to be silenced. Yet the deeper mystery endures. What secret was so powerful that fire itself would not touch it? Was it a curse, a blessing, or a warning to those who believe that anything can be erased by force? The ash scroll that never turned to ash remains a testament to the limits of power, the endurance of forbidden knowledge, and the eerie truth that sometimes the things we most desperately try to destroy are the ones destined to outlast us all. The bound book of forgotten saints. In the heart of medieval Germany, where the mist hung low over dense forests and the air was thick with the incense of prayer, there stood a monastery whose monks guarded a secret stranger than any relic. Within its stone walls, past flickering candlelight and the slow shuffle of sandaled feet, a single book waited, bound in faded leather, its pages yellowed with time, its contents a source of awe and fear. This was the bound book of forgotten saints, a volume that chronicled the lives, miracles, and martyrdoms of holy men and women never recorded anywhere else in all of Christendom. The story begins with the monks themselves, scholars as much as they were seekers of grace. The scriptorium was their sanctuary, a place where scripture and legend mingled, where ink became a bridge between the mortal and the divine. In the darkest days of winter, as storms raged and plague crept ever closer, the brothers found solace in recording the acts of saints, those who had supposedly lived and died in the service of God. But as the years passed, a strange pattern emerged. New names began to fill the book, saints whose stories were unlike any the Church had ever sanctioned. These saints, written with the same meticulous script as those found in Rome's official canon, bore no connection to familiar legends. There was Saint Gerulf, who was said to have tamed wolves with his prayers, Saint Lisa, whose tears turned to pearls and cured madness, Saint Otmar, who vanished into a blizzard and returned with bread for the starving, Saint Brigald, who spoke with the dead and led lost souls across the river. Their miracles were extraordinary, but no mention of them could be found in papal decrees, local records, or even the hagiographies of neighboring monasteries. The stories grew stranger as the years went on. Some saints seemed to exist only within the monastery's walls, their legends shifting subtly with each retelling. Their feast days brought secret ceremonies, candlelit processions through the cloisters, and prayers whispered in a dialect long since vanished from the world outside. For a time, the book was cherished as a wellspring of local wonder, a source of hope in a land where famine, plague, and war were never far away. But when word reached the higher authorities of the Church, suspicion took root. A visiting bishop, sent to review the monastery's records, demanded to see the book. He pored over its pages, his frown deepening with every unfamiliar name. How, he demanded, could such saints exist without the Church's blessing? Why were their miracles never witnessed outside these walls? Some whispered that the monks had invented the stories, spinning tales to comfort themselves in the bleakness of winter. Others suspected heresy, that the book was a secret scripture, a rival gospel challenging the authority of Rome itself. Under pressure, the abbot convened the brothers. The book was deemed apocryphal, unofficial, perhaps even dangerous. Some urged its destruction, but superstition prevailed. A few monks swore that in the darkest nights, the forgotten saints would appear in dreams, offering comfort or stern warnings. To destroy the book, they feared, might invite curses upon them all. And so, a compromise was reached. The bound book of forgotten saints was wrapped in cloth, sealed in wax, and buried beneath the monastery floor, beneath a stone marked only with a single cryptic blessing. Years turned to centuries. The monastery weathered the storms of Reformation and Revolution. Abbey walls crumbled, were rebuilt, and crumbled again. New generations of monks came and went, many never learning of the hidden book below their feet. But every so often, the legend resurfaced. Novices spoke of voices heard during night prayers, voices not their own, whispering the names of saints no one else remembered. A few old monks kept the stories alive, retelling the miracles of Gerulf, Lisa, Otmar, and Brigald as a kind of local folklore, a secret inheritance from those who had come before. In the modern era, researchers and historians have combed through monastery archives, searching for clues. Was the book a forgery? A deliberate act of rebellion by monks seeking to create their own pantheon? Or was it something more, a collection of local saints whose stories were lost in the flood of history, erased by war, politics, or the slow erosion of memory? Some believe the book's creation was a psychological balm, a way for the monks to survive the harshness of their world by inventing holy figures who felt close, who could answer prayers in ways the distant saints of Rome never could. Others are haunted by the possibility that the book records genuine miracles witnessed only by those within the monastery's walls, miracles so intimate and strange that the outside world would never accept them. What does it mean for a saint to be forgotten? Is sainthood a matter of public record, or is it enough for a handful of faithful souls to remember and believe? The bound book of forgotten saints remains hidden, entombed beneath stone, wrapped in layers of secrecy and time. Yet its power endures, not in miracles, but in the lingering question it asks of all who hear its story. Who decides which lives are remembered, which souls become immortal in ink, and which are left to vanish into silence? In every monastery, every church, every community, there are names unrecorded, stories untold, saints lost to the shadows. Perhaps the greatest miracle is that anyone is remembered at all. In the flickering candlelight of an ancient chapel, as prayers rise to the vaulted ceiling and shadows play across old stones, one might wonder if the forgotten saints are listening still, waiting to be named again, to step out of legend and into memory. The bound book of forgotten saints is more than a relic. It is a window into the fragile border between remembrance and oblivion, a silent testament to the human hunger for meaning and the eternal hope that no life is truly lost as long as someone remembers. The Psalter that rewrote verses overnight. In the candlelit gloom of a medieval scriptorium, where hours bled together beneath the slow drip of wax and the unceasing scratch of quills, a solitary monk confronted a terror that would change not only his fate, but the shadowed legacy of his abbey. The tale comes to us not from legend, but from marginalia, chronicles, and the rumors that seeped into the very stones of that ancient monastery. A story so unsettling, so heretical in its implications, that it was buried in lead and silence for centuries. Brother Matthias was a humble copyist, devoted to his sacred duty, transcribing the Psalter, the ancient book of Psalms, for the glory of God and the preservation of faith. Day after day, he bent over parchment, inked his lines with the careful reverence of a soul desperate for salvation, and recited prayers to steady his hand and spirit. Yet, as the weeks went on, Brother Matthias began to notice something strange. A verse that had been rendered faithfully the day before appeared changed in the morning light. Sometimes a word would be missing, a phrase altered, a whole line reversed, or replaced by something altogether new and unrecognizable. At first, he doubted himself. He combed through the drafts and exemplars, compared his work against the abbey's cherished Vulgate. But each morning brought new changes, more errors, except they were not mere mistakes, but verses that made no sense, verses that spoke in riddles, or verses that seemed to echo events and thoughts that Matthias had only dreamed the night before. The psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd," would become, "The shadows are my shepherds, I shall walk in doubt." Another day, a verse prophesied the collapse of towers, or hinted at secrets buried beneath the abbey's floor. Terrified, Matthias began documenting the phenomenon in the margins of his work. He described his growing fear, his attempts to copy every word perfectly, his prayers for deliverance. But the changes persisted, always subtle, always plausible at a glance, until he realized that not just words, but meanings themselves were being rewritten. Psalms that once consoled now threatened. Blessings turned to curses. The order of verses unraveled, then rewove themselves into patterns Matthias could not understand. Word spread. At first, the other monks scoffed, blaming fatigue, faulty ink, or the devil's temptation. But when they compared the pages themselves, they saw it. The original script and the altered side by side, the ink of one still fresh, the other faded as if it had always been there. Panic swept through the monastery. Accusations followed swiftly. Some believed Matthias was a heretic, a sorcerer, perhaps even possessed, altering scripture as a test of faith. Others wondered if he was a prophet, or if the Psalter itself was alive, a vessel for some unfathomable force that refused to be contained by human hands. The abbot, fearing scandal and damnation, ordered the Psalter examined by the learned and the devout. Priests and scholars arrived, but none could explain the shifting script. Some attempted to copy the altered verses by night, only to find their own work transformed by morning. Fear turned to desperation. Was this a test from God, a punishment, or the creeping work of evil in their midst? At last, the decision was made. The Psalter was to be sealed, not in wood or stone, but in a box of solid lead. An act of both protection and penance, a physical attempt to lock away whatever spirit or curse haunted the pages. The monks gathered in silent procession, their faces white with fear, as the book was placed inside the leaden coffin and buried beneath the chapel floor. Brother Matthias, broken by accusation and terror, spent his remaining days in penance and silence, never again trusted to touch a sacred text. The Psalter's fate became a cautionary tale, a legend buried alongside it. In time, the monastery fell to ruin, the lead box lost to memory and earth. Yet stories persist, of nights when a chill rises from the floor, or when whispered verses echo in empty halls, as if the words themselves are still shifting, rewriting, reaching through the centuries to remind the world that no text, however sacred, is ever truly finished. Scholars who have uncovered fragments of the Abbey's archives marvel at the detail and fear in Brother Matthias's own notes. They wonder, was this the first and last case of a living manuscript, an object so sensitive to human thought and worry that it remade itself each night? Or was it the hallucination of a desperate mind, haunted by the weight of divine responsibility, and the creeping sense that language itself is never fully under our control? Either way, the Psalter that rewrote verses overnight remains one of history's strangest mysteries, a book sealed not merely against time and decay, but against the possibility that even Scripture can become unstable, and that sometimes the word refuses to be tamed. The forbidden map of heaven's mechanics. Beneath the candlelit arches of a 12th century monastery, hidden away in the restless heart of Christendom, there once lay a book unlike any other. It was not a gospel, nor a book of prayers, but a hand-illustrated manuscript that promised answers to questions mankind had been taught never to ask. It was called, in whispers and in terror, the forbidden map of heaven's mechanics. Within its pages, legends say, was not the will of God, but the blueprints of the universe, the engine that powered the stars, the machinery of the firmament, rendered in ink and gold and heresy. Its story began in the waning light of the High Middle Ages, when Europe's great monasteries stood as fortresses of knowledge and faith, their scriptoria humming with the work of 1,000 careful hands. In one such abbey, whose true name has been lost to history but whose shadow lingers over the chronicles of every forbidden text, a single monk, Brother Remigius, labored in silence. Remigius was both scribe and astronomer, possessed of a mind so precise and restless that his brothers regarded him with awe and caution. Night after night, he charted the heavens, mapping the movements of stars and planets, marking patterns that did not match the stories told from the pulpit. By candlelight, he filled his manuscript with what he saw: celestial diagrams, wheels within wheels, the strange dance of planets against the constellations, geometric lattices that echoed the very gears of a cosmic machine. But he did not stop at observation. The book grew thick with layered illustrations, cutaways of imagined engines behind the sky, celestial spheres powered by intricate cogs, great celestial regulators spinning in harmony, and annotations that whispered of an order more complex, more mechanical than divine mystery allowed. As word of Remigius's work spread, awe became suspicion. The manuscript, with its mesmerizing diagrams and its bold claims that the universe ran on laws that could be measured and even predicted, quickly drew the attention of abbey leaders. At first, they demanded to see it. Then, they demanded to control it. For the church in those years held the heavens as sacred, a domain ruled not by mechanism, but by the hand of God, unpredictable, ineffable, and absolute. To suggest, as Remigius's map did, that the universe could be understood as a machine, a system with gears and logic, was to chip away at the foundation of faith itself. The manuscript became a lightning rod. Younger monks gathered in secret, marveling at its detailed illustrations. Spirals of stars like clockwork, planets tethered by invisible arms, the sun as a spinning dynamo at the center of all things. Some saw it as proof that God's mind was more wondrous than any sermon could describe. Others whispered that Remigius had gone too far, that such knowledge was dangerous, that it opened a door the church had kept locked for centuries. Soon, word reached higher authorities. A traveling bishop, upon hearing rumors of a book that mapped the machinery of heaven, arrived under cover of darkness, demanding to see the blasphemous manuscript. When he did, his face grew pale. To him, the book was not a marvel, but a threat, a wedge that could split the church, a work so seductive that even the learned might forsake faith for reason. The bishop invoked the gravest of decrees. The manuscript was forbidden, its knowledge branded as heresy. On the night of the decree, a hush fell over the abbey. The monks, torn between awe and terror, gathered in the scriptorium to witness the book's fate. There was no trial, no argument. By order of the church, The book was to be removed from the world. And so, in the flicker of torchlight, they dug a shallow pit beneath the flagstones, beneath the very room where knowledge was meant to flourish. The manuscript, its pages still damp with ink, its illustrations gleaming, was wrapped in linen and laid to rest among dust and secrets. The pit was sealed, and the floor above it polished smooth, so that no trace remained. But the story did not end in silence. In the years that followed, the abbey changed. The scriptorium grew cold. Copyists lost their passion, haunted by dreams of gears and cosmic engines ticking in the darkness beneath their feet. Some monks swore that, in the deepest hours of night, a faint mechanical humming rose from the stones. Others claimed to see flashes of light, miniature stars spinning just beyond the corner of their eyes, visions of the forbidden diagrams that once mapped the sky. The manuscript itself faded into legend. Some said that Remigius vanished the night the book was buried, wandering off into the hills to continue his calculations under the open heavens. Others believed that the church sent men to hunt him, to ensure the blueprints for the engine behind the stars were never spoken again. But the knowledge could not be unmade. Whispers of the book's existence traveled with pilgrims, carried in riddles and secret symbols, a hidden code for those daring enough to seek answers outside the dogma of the day. Centuries passed. Science rose from the ashes of superstition, and astronomers once again mapped the heavens, not with fear, but with curiosity. Yet even as telescopes swept the sky and mathematics revealed the harmonies of orbits, the legend of the forbidden map remained, a wound in history, a reminder that knowledge, once glimpsed, cannot be erased, only hidden. Today, beneath the ruins of forgotten monasteries, treasure hunters and scholars dig, their hopes ignited by fragments of rumor, a corner of parchment with gears drawn in gold, a broken tile etched with the pattern of stars. They search for proof that, centuries before Galileo, Newton, and Kepler, someone saw the sky as a machine, dared to sketch the mechanism behind the mystery, and paid for that knowledge with silence. And so, the forbidden map endures, not just as a lost manuscript, but as a question that haunts the curious heart. What if the universe is not just a miracle, but a masterpiece of logic and law, a clockwork so perfect that even God's hand is revealed in its gears? What if the engine of the stars was once drawn by candlelight, and then buried, not just beneath stone, but beneath the weight of fear and power? The answer may yet lie hidden under the dust of centuries, waiting for the day when the world is ready to see the sky for what it truly is, not just an endless expanse of mystery, but the greatest machine ever conceived, spinning in silence above us all. The monks who disappeared with the Book of Smoke. In the shadowed heart of medieval Europe, where superstition braided itself through faith and fear, there are tales the church never dared to canonize, stories so strange they haunt the cracks between official history. One of these is whispered among ruined stones and drifting incense, the vanishing of the monks of Saint Armand, and the fate of the Book of Smoke. The Abbey of Saint Armand once stood atop a fog-shrouded hill in southern France, its bell tower visible above vineyards and heather. The monks who lived there were known for their austere practices and their hunger for knowledge, copying forbidden texts and debating the boundaries between sanctity and heresy. They kept to themselves, growing rare herbs, their rituals punctuated by the drone of Gregorian chant and the silent turning of pages in their candlelit library. In the spring of 1481, the order's fate changed forever. A courier arrived at midnight, bearing a manuscript sealed in wax as black as pitch. He claimed the book had passed through many hands, alchemists, condemned mystics, and wandering Jews fleeing the Inquisition. No one had dared to keep it for long. The courier would not stay the night. He pressed the parcel into the abbot's hands, crossed himself, and vanished into the mist. The book itself was strange from the first touch. Bound in scorched leather, the pages were blackened, as if kissed by fire, yet still readable under the right light. The title was burned into the cover, Liber Fumus, the Book of Smoke. Within, the writing twisted between Latin, Greek, and ciphered diagrams. Some pages described the nature of spirit and fire, others hinted at forbidden techniques, how to unshackle the soul from the body, how to ignite it into a living flame. There were meditations said to open the third breath, incantations promising transcendence through combustion. At the heart of the book lay a promise, a method to burn away all earthly weight and ascend as pure smoke, leaving no trace but an empty robe. For days, the monks studied the book in secret. Those who could not resist its lure read aloud passages in the gloom of the library, and strange things began to happen. Smoke curled from the candles and did not rise. Incense burned with no scent. Several monks claimed to see figures flickering in the mist outside, shapes that resembled themselves, or others long dead. Whispers carried through stone corridors, of nightmares filled with fire, of waking to find the sheets dusted with ash, of breathing smoke instead of air. Then, all at once, the abbey went silent. Villagers from nearby towns, used to the distant song of monks, noticed that no bells rang and no smoke rose from the kitchens. When they climbed the hill to investigate, they found the gates unbarred, the gardens choked with weeds, and every chamber deserted. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, only the chill of abandonment and the faint odor of burnt parchment. In the great hall, the library's doors stood open. Inside, only a single chained podium remained, its iron links broken. The Book of Smoke was gone. Rumors spread like wildfire through the Languedoc. Some said the monks had succeeded in the ritual, their souls consumed in holy fire, rising invisibly with the morning mist. Others believed they had summoned something they could not contain, and had been erased, body and spirit, as punishment for trespassing into forbidden knowledge. Inquisitors arrived, sifting through the abbey's remnants for any scrap of evidence. They found only a handful of singed prayer books and the podium's blackened chain, still warm to the touch days after the monks vanished. The fate of the Book of Smoke has never been resolved. Some claimed it reappeared years later in the hands of a mad alchemist in Prague, or in the possession of an Italian magician who vanished in the flames of his own laboratory. The truth is, no trace of the book or the monks was ever found again. The abbey itself fell to ruin, and all that endures is the chained podium, still standing in the weeds, its surface stained dark as soot, a mute witness to the moment an entire order passed into legend. Centuries have passed, but the story refuses to fade. On cold mornings, villagers swear that wisps of white smoke still curl above the ruins, drifting skyward before dissolving into sunlight. Some say you can hear chanting if you stand quietly among the stones, the voices thin as vapor. The Book of Smoke remains lost, perhaps forever. But its lesson endures, that there are mysteries so fierce and consuming, they do not simply kill or corrupt, but erase, leaving nothing but the ghost of a question hanging in the air. What knowledge, what hunger for transcendence, could make men choose to vanish in a single breath, leaving the world with nothing but smoke, silence, and the memory of something that cannot burn away? The Codex that tasted like honey. In the candlelit shadows of a medieval chapel, where faith often brushed against the uncanny, there existed a book so strange it passed almost unnoticed through the centuries, until the day it ruined a man's mind. The monks called it the Codex Mellitus, the Book of Honey, for a single reason. When kissed during ancient rituals, the parchment left a sweet, lingering taste on the lips. Like wild honey fresh from the comb, a sensation both miraculous and unsettling in a world where most books reeked of ink and dust. Its origins were already mysterious by the time it entered church records. Some whispered the Codex had been scribed in a distant land, carried to Europe by pilgrims fleeing a doomed monastery. Others hinted it was written by a solitary mystic, a man who had lived on honey and wild herbs, who believed that sweetness could be sanctified, and that the divine was most present where the senses surprised the soul. However it arrived, the book quickly became woven into ritual. For decades, it was kissed during initiations, feast days, and nights when storms battered the stone walls, and the faithful needed reassurance that miracles still lingered in the world. The Codex itself was neither beautiful nor ugly. Its cover was plain, but its pages seemed to shimmer faintly in candlelight, covered in a script both familiar and strange, Latin with flickers of some older tongue, words that seemed to shift their meaning depending on who read them. What truly set it apart was the taste. The first time a novice pressed his lips to the page, expecting cold parchment, he flinched in surprise. The sweet, fragrant flavor was unmistakable, even addictive. Soon the ritual became something sought after, the kiss of honeyed wisdom, a brief, gentle blessing on the tongue. Some monks swore the taste lingered for hours. Others claimed it faded at once, replaced by a strange yearning to read more. For years, the Codex was used with reverence. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a feast day, the air heavy with incense, the chanting of monks echoing off stone. One brother, young and ambitious, was asked to read a passage aloud. As he leaned in for the ritual kiss, witnesses later said, the candlelight bent strangely, as if the air itself was thickening. The brother paused. His face grew pale. He pressed his lips to the Codex, again and again, as if unable to stop. His hands began to tremble. Then, suddenly, he shrieked, dropping the book as if it had burned him. He collapsed, writhing on the stone floor, eyes wild, mouth frothing, babbling in tongues no one recognized. The abbey erupted in chaos. The afflicted monk was carried away, feverish and raving, unable to sleep, eat, or even recognize his closest friends. In the days that followed, he spoke of visions, of golden hives inside the cathedral walls, of a voice that dripped like honey but stung like bees, of a sweetness that promised wisdom but left only madness behind. He never recovered. Some said he wandered into the forest, chasing the scent of wildflowers, never to be seen again. Others believed he died in a locked cell, his mind forever lost in a labyrinth of sweetness and fear. After that night, the Codex was deemed cursed. The abbot called an emergency council. Some argued for its destruction, but most were afraid to even touch it again. There were rumors that even the scent of its pages could lure a man into a trance, that the taste was not just honey, but something far older, an echo of forbidden rites, a memory of the ancient world when gods demanded strange offerings, and knowledge came wrapped in seduction. In the end, the decision was made to lock the book away. It was wrapped in linen soaked in salt water, sealed in a wooden chest, and hidden deep in the monastery's archives, behind layers of brick and prayer. Yet, the legend did not die. For generations, monks whispered about the Book of Honey. Novices dared each other to sneak into the archives at night, searching for the lost chest. A few, it is said, claimed to hear bees buzzing when they prayed nearby, or to wake from dreams with the taste of honey on their tongues. The older brothers would shake their heads, warning that some sweetness comes with a price, that temptation, even when dressed in the trappings of ritual, can open doors that should remain closed. Historians who have studied the tale argue over its truth. Was the Codex truly enchanted? Could medieval inks or parchment treatments have produced the honeyed taste? Or did the monk's faith and expectation transform an ordinary sensation into something miraculous and then monstrous? Some point to medical accounts of dancing manias and mass hysteria, moments when entire communities succumbed to strange behaviors driven by fear, suggestion, or a hunger for something beyond the world they knew. But the Codex Mellitus endures in memory, its physical fate unknown. Some believe it still lies hidden, sweetness sealed in darkness, waiting for the day when hands too curious or too desperate will break its bonds and taste its secret again. The story is a warning as old as myth itself, that what delights the senses may ensnare the mind, that honey can hide venom, and that knowledge, once tasted, cannot be untasted, no matter the cost. So, if you ever find yourself in a ruined monastery and the air is thick with the scent of beeswax and old paper, and a forgotten book gleams in the torchlight, remember the fate of the brother who sought wisdom and found only madness. Some secrets, sweet as they may seem, are best left sealed forever in the dark. The manuscript that required silence to read. In the cloistered stone hush of a 12th century monastery, where secrets drifted like incense through vaulted halls, there was a manuscript whose reading demanded more than careful eyes. It demanded absolute, breathless silence. Its legend lingers in the archives of lost abbeys, preserved in feverish marginalia and in the chilling caution passed down by generations of monks who feared what words could awaken. The book's arrival was itself a mystery. Some chronicles claim it came from the east, wrapped in rough linen and branded with the sigil of an exiled mystic. Others whisper it was discovered in the wake of a ruined scriptorium, the only item unscorched after a fire that devoured all else. However it came, it soon gained a reputation for unease. Its pages seemed impossibly thin, yet refused to tear, and its script, fluid and shifting, caught the eye like a serpent's movement in the grass. It was Brother Augustine who first recorded the manuscript's strange rule. Alone in the candlelit scriptorium, he found a warning inked in trembling Latin across the inside cover. Let none utter a word as you read, lest blood answer for sound. A warning, perhaps, or a threat. Augustine, careful and devout, obeyed without question, reading only with his eyes, never daring even a whisper. But as word of the book's unusual beauty spread, curiosity gnawed at the walls of discipline. It was inevitable that another would test the boundary. Brother Paul, younger and newly arrived, scoffed at superstition, and, emboldened by pride or boredom, read a line aloud in the echoing stillness. The moment the word left his lips, witnesses said, he choked, his mouth filling with hot, bitter blood, staining the stones and sacred vellum alike. The pain was instant, shocking. He collapsed, gasping, while others rushed to his side. Paul survived, but his tongue bore a raw wound for months, and he never spoke clearly again. Terror spread like wildfire through the abbey. Some said it was a curse, others divine retribution for breaking the sacred order of reading. The manuscript was swiftly isolated, its pages never again turned except in voiceless study. The monks nailed the cover shut with black iron, each blow of the hammer a prayer, a plea, a warning for the future. It was buried in the library's deepest vault, wrapped in chains and legend. But even sealed, the manuscript retained its dark allure. Some whispered that it was written in a language older than Babel, meant to be heard only in the mind's silence, that the sound of human voice profaned a text written for spirits alone. Others speculated that the book contained spells or invocations so potent, the mere act of giving them voice could unravel the soul or unleash horrors best left unnamed. Modern scholars, stumbling across cryptic references in monastic inventories, suggest a more mundane, though no less eerie, explanation. The ink itself, perhaps, was laced with mercury or arsenic, activated and made airborne by the moisture of breath, poisoning any who spoke above its pages. Yet those who believe in the power of the word, in the ancient terror of voice and silence, know the story is older and stranger than chemistry. They see in the manuscript that required silence to read a lesson as old as language itself, that words have weight, and that sometimes reading aloud is a ritual too dangerous for mortal flesh. And so, the book remains, nailed shut and hidden from view, its true contents unread and perhaps unreadable, save by the rare soul who dares to listen in perfect silence. In every monastery where its tale is told, monks lower their voices and bow their heads, reminded that there are secrets even faith cannot command, secrets that draw blood from any who would give them voice. The Psalter, hidden in a corpse's chest. In the annals of medieval Europe, there are stories so strange, so deeply unsettling, that they seem to hang suspended between history and legend, unmoored from reason, yet too meticulously documented to be dismissed as mere myth. This is one such tale, one that has haunted the ruins of an English abbey for more than 6 centuries. The story of the Psalter found hidden in a corpse's chest. The year was 1380. Europe staggered under the weight of plague, famine, and endless war. The countryside groaned with the exhaustion of death, and the monasteries, for all their faith, were not immune to the darkness that swept the land. In a remote abbey perched above the marshes, its stones damp and green with age, the monks prepared to inter a brother who had died, some said, of unnatural causes. The man's name has been lost to time, erased from the rolls by fear and shame, but his death would leave a scar that no penance could erase. The monks, weary and numb from too many burials, expected the usual rites: prayer, anointing, burial in the abbey's hallowed ground. But as they prepared the body, something unthinkable was revealed. The corpse's chest, split not by violence, but with an almost surgical precision, had been hollowed out. Within the ribcage, nestled among the remains of organs and bone, was a small, exquisitely bound psalter, a prayer book, no bigger than a man's fist, wrapped in linen, now darkened by blood and time. Shock rippled through the abbey. The monks recoiled in horror and awe, unsure whether they were witness to a miracle or a blasphemy. No one could explain how the book had come to be placed there, nor how the incision had been made without destroying the chest entirely. The wound was old, the flesh already beginning to knit around the edges, as if the book had been placed there not after death, but while the monk yet lived. Yet there had been no report of surgery, no sign of suffering or mutilation during the man's life. He had, by all accounts, died quietly in his cell, with no last confession, no known sin. Word of the discovery spread quickly. The abbot, terrified of scandal or supernatural reprisal, ordered the matter kept secret. But secrets are difficult to keep in the cloister, especially when fear is thick as incense. Some monks believed the Psalter was a sign of sanctity, a divine mark, proof that the brother had carried scripture within his very heart. Others, recalling whispered tales of forbidden rites and heretical sects, saw a darker omen. Had the monk been part of a secret brotherhood, smuggling coded messages in the flesh? Had he sought to hide the word of God from eyes he no longer trusted? Or was the book itself a curse, a relic that brought ruin to any who touched it? The Psalter was examined in silence, its pages still supple, the ink unfaded. The prayers it contained were in Latin, familiar enough, but the order of the psalms was strange, fragments out of sequence, verses omitted or replaced by odd symbols. One monk, a scholar of ancient languages, claimed that the book contained ciphers, hidden instructions, warnings, or confessions encoded within the holy text. Another insisted that the book was a relic of martyrdom, a practice once used by persecuted believers to carry scripture where no guard could find it. Yet the abbey's silence was not enough to keep the outside world at bay. News leaked. Within weeks, a delegation from the bishop arrived, demanding to see both the corpse and the book. They interrogated the monks for days, searching for any sign of heresy, witchcraft, or conspiracy. The burial was exhumed, the body examined again, the Psalter scrutinized by the church's most learned men. No monk confessed to the act. None claimed authorship of the book, or knowledge of its placement. The dead man's past was ransacked, his possessions searched, his cell stripped bare. Yet no evidence emerged, only the stubborn presence of the Psalter, still hidden within the hollowed ribs, still unexplained. The church decreed that the book should be sealed away, buried beneath the altar and guarded as both relic and warning. The corpse was reinterred, the grave marked by nothing but a simple stone, the man's name forever erased from the records. But in the abbey's dark halls, the memory lingered. Some monks dreamed of the Psalter, of waking to find their own chests split and scripture nestled within, of being chosen or cursed by a God whose motives no man could understand. As the years passed, legends grew. Pilgrims whispered that on certain nights, the abbey's stones echoed with chanting that did not match any known liturgy. Some said that the Psalter had been written by an angel, its true words only visible to those near death. Others feared it was a devil's trap, a vessel for forbidden knowledge, a scripture that devoured the soul as it was read. A handful of chroniclers, brave or reckless, copied the book's text in secret, but each transcription was different. Prayers jumbled, verses scrambled, as if the Psalter itself resisted being read by mortal eyes. In time, the abbey fell to ruin, battered by storms and neglect, its records lost to fire and pillage. Only the story survived, passed down in the oral histories of monks, chroniclers, and villagers whose ancestors once prayed at its altar. The burial ground became a place of uneasy pilgrimage, a warning against secrets too deep to bear, a lesson in the price of hidden faith. Historians in the centuries since have puzzled over the account, debating whether it was a miracle, a crime, or a desperate act of devotion in an age where faith and fear walked hand in hand. Some argue the tale is a metaphor for the hidden dangers of heresy, the way forbidden knowledge can be carried inside us, unknown until it bursts forth at the moment of death. Others believe the story reflects a forgotten rite, a way for persecuted monks to keep scripture close when the church itself could not be trusted. Yet, in the end, the Psalter remains a mystery. No one knows who wrote it, who placed it in the body, or what secrets its verses truly contain. All that endures is the image, a corpse on a cold stone slab, chest opened not by violence but by purpose, a book of prayers resting where the heart should be. It is a vision that chills the blood and stirs the soul, a reminder that in the shadows of faith, even the dead may keep secrets, and the word of God may travel paths no living man could ever imagine. The salt-cursed pages of the last prophecy, beneath the stone floors of a forgotten monastery near the mist-laden shores of Lake Geneva, legend claims there lies a prophecy so dangerous, so corrosive to reality itself, that even the passage of centuries has not diluted its dread. The story is rarely written, more often whispered on cold nights by those who know that not all holy men sought light. Some spent their lives containing the darkness. This is the tale of the salt-cursed pages of the last prophecy. It was the bitter winter of 1523 when the monks of Saint-Epine first received the warning. A merchant, half mad with fever and shivering from exhaustion, stumbled into the abbey clutching a sheaf of parchment bound in fraying leather. He babbled of dreams filled with screaming shadows, of words that move in the dark, and a prophecy penned in a script that twisted and changed even as he tried to read it. The merchant claimed the manuscript had crossed many hands, each owner dead or missing, each monastery plagued by inexplicable madness until the book was sent away in terror. The abbot, a cautious man whose life had been a study in containment, recognized something ancient and predatory in the merchant's words. The scrolls were inspected only briefly by candlelight, under the eyes of the oldest monks. The script was like nothing they'd seen. Letters seemed to swim and distort, wriggling on the page, sometimes spelling out the reader's own name. Some monks reported hearing voices or seeing images flicker at the edge of vision. One scribe fainted after trying to transcribe a single line. Another clawed at his eyes, begging to unsee what he'd glimpsed. It soon became clear that the manuscript was more than dangerous. It was alive, or as close as ink and vellum could come to sentience. The monks recalled ancient tales of words that awakened when exposed to the air, spreading contagion not through touch or sound, but by the act of reading, by the simple friction of human curiosity. The abbot made a choice. This prophecy could not be destroyed by fire, nor drowned, nor cut apart. The parchment resisted all attempts. Instead, he turned to the old methods, the rituals of preservation and suppression known only to those who'd spent lifetimes fighting secrets. Salt was brought from the shores of Lake Geneva, barrels and barrels of the purest white. In the frigid crypt beneath the abbey, the monks lined the stone floor with salt, poured it into the gaps between bricks, and filled heavy casks to the brim. The manuscript was wrapped in waxed cloth, sealed with holy oil and lead, and then lowered into the heart of the salt, the barrels hammered shut, and buried beneath layers of packed earth and prayers. The monks inscribed wards on the crypt's doors and set candles to burn eternally, the flame a warning as much as a shield. The legend says that as the barrels were sealed, a deep silence fell on the crypt, a stillness so profound that even the candle's flames seemed to stand motionless. In the days that followed, the monks who had glimpsed the pages fell into uneasy sleep. Some never woke, others spoke in riddles or fell silent forever, their eyes haunted. The abbot forbade any mention of the prophecy. Over the years, the story was reduced to a warning passed from prior to prior, always ending with the same instructions. If the barrels are opened, if air touches the pages, the prophecy will awaken, and then the world will know its last day. Generations came and went, empires rose and fell, but the crypt remained sealed. The abbey itself was abandoned, overgrown by brambles and forgotten by the world. Only the salt vault endured, protected by a silence that seemed almost sentient, a boundary where the living dared not cross. Occasionally a scholar would hear rumors, a barrel of salt hidden in the catacombs, a text so dangerous it could not be spoken aloud. Some tried to search for it, but always they were turned away by the fear in the eyes of local villagers, who warned that the curse sleeps and must not be woken. In recent times, scientists and historians have searched the ruined monastery, drawn by stories of lost prophecies and forbidden texts. Ground-penetrating radar has confirmed the existence of deep, barrel-shaped voids beneath the crypt, but no one has dared to break the seals. When the air is dry and the wind comes off the lake, it's said you can still taste salt on your tongue if you stand near the old abbey walls. And so the salt-cursed pages of the last prophecy remain, entombed in barrels of salt, untouched and unread for half a millennium. What the prophecy contains, no one alive can say. Some believe it holds the final fate of humanity, a prediction so terrible that even knowing it would bring ruin. Others say it is a story, alive, evolving, waiting for eyes to give it form and voice. Whatever the truth, the barrels remain sealed, the crypt undisturbed, and the world safe, for now, from the prophecy.